Elden Ring boss quality. My assertion that it's an unbalanced disappointment brought about tremendous discourse. One of my most commented on videos of all time after only 3 weeks, I can't express how much I enjoyed reading through so many thoughtful analyses. It's remarkable how polarizing elements of FromSoft games can be, even if most agree the collected package they create are masterpieces. With my criticisms of boss design clear, today I'd like to focus on what battles are most successful in spite of it all. Without further ado, here are my top 10 best bosses in Elden Ring. Number 10, Loretta Knight of the Haligtree. My first and what I expect may be some surprising choices on today's list, Loretta cracks the top 10 as the peak of Tree Sentinel's design. From the first battle out of Limgray's tutorial tomb, to the draconic guardian of the capital city, to the ambush amidst the depths of the Haligtree, in this final duel, Loretta's mastery of melee is matched by ruthless sorcery. Homing glintstone arcs keeping you on your toes, 2 deadly magic-infused combos, powerful homing blasts, and hefty arrows raining down upon you. They're daunting additions to an already demanding brawl with high agility, great range, and subtle deviations in her combos. Your opportunities come from adept defense and evasion, strafing to blind spots, reading the weapon arm shoulder shrug for recovery frames, identifying which moves leave longer openings, and not overextending your stamina in fear of her magic assaults. Her glaive may slap, but it's her magic damage you should truly fear. Those sorcery charge swipes can stagger and demolish stacked HP in one fell swoop. In spite of this, the aforementioned variety of ways to find openings allows for an exhilarating back and forth. Juggling reading tells, stamina management, commitment to your own attack animations, and satisfying dodge execution leads to one of the best balanced battles in the game. While I didn't enjoy the reskinned repetition in the game overall, I appreciate when FromSoft made notable variations to keep things fresh, particularly in this case where the base template was so strong. Though the likeness is enough to keep her from greater heights, everything Loretta adds to the formula elevated her into the top 10. Number 9, Radagon and Elden Beast. A double feature finale with one of the best singular bosses in the game, and a lukewarm Lovecraftian Glittersaurus. I should mention I believe it was a mistake in the past to count phase bosses separately. Even if Radagon and Elden Beast are distinctly different designs, you can't claim victory without defeating both at once. Radagon is the epitome of the brawling knight fight we've come to love. Fast combos with minute variations for savvy observers, mostly parryable blows, great closing range, magic to add depth from afar, an explosive mid-HP and rage, solid recovery frames, reasonable stagger, and non-bloated HP totals all create a fantastic intro battle. My gripes are mostly minor and outstretched to most of the bosses in the game. He has those AoE after effects on many attacks for deceptive roll catches, and he's rampant with those Nameless King style delays. The only unique annoyance to him is the teleport. Conceptually, it's great, but I don't like the ability to teleport on top of the player, stun them with the AoE, then follow into a combo you can hardly see due to the flash, even if you successfully dodge the AoE's after effect. These are minor in the face of everything I loved, capped especially by his incredible OST. A remix of the main theme is a fantastic callback to the beginning of your journey, and even the whole franchise with its homage to the Demon's Souls theme. The track's bombastic energy throttles hype into overdrive. In contrast, the shift to Elden Beast carries a melancholic energy, an eerie sadness, and sheer awe at the spectacle before you. Visually, it's stunning. The holy magic takes this to another level, arguably too far at times, obscuring tells. Experiences against the beast will vary wildly, with it sometimes being melee focused, other times spamming attacks to force you on the defensive while it swims away constantly. For every attack I enjoy, like the Elden Rings, a creative use of the jump mechanic and player positioning to get the drop on the beast when it emerges, there's downsides, such as the arena barriers being unclear. Then there's Elden Stars. What the fuck, Miyazaki? In what universe is it a good idea to shove homing pebbles of holy magic up my rear for half a minute while the boss has full reign to continue endless assaults? This is present in other attacks like the Fire Breath, where it can begin an attack before the persistent hitbox is subsided, or the volley of holy rain that forces you to run while the beast is free. These lacking recovery times destroy the pacing and make for a clusterfuck of evasion. That's in addition to a girthy HP total to rival some of the game's largest, which is problematic when you include Radagon as the first phase. All of this is further exacerbated by a repetitive issue with oversized foes in Elden Ring. Big bosses, bigger arena, biggest jukes. Nearly every boss with gargantuan size boasts an arena of similar caliber and features at least one ability to dash away from the player. Elden Beast's ranged kit makes this a battle focused on running away and centering difficulty around getting in. But as you do, it's complete luck if it decides to stay in melee or dip out for more magic spam. This choice is baffling in a game that has an easy solution: Torrent. I don't understand why the horse was allowed in some of these fights and not others. Unfortunately, the annoyance of battling the beast outweighs any joy it provides, and suppresses Radagon's ranking, one that would have been in the top 5 as an individual. Maybe network with your allies more carefully next time, Marika. Speaking of networks, did you know there are mini-bosses attacking your browsing history for personal information all the time? If you aren't a fan of being an unwilling open book, consider encrypting your browsing with today's sponsor, NordVPN. Not only does it disguise your IP address and keep you safe online, NordVPN can be used to access content blocked in your country. Foreign Netflix, gaming discounts from overseas, even allowing you to play games prohibited in your country. A VPN knocks down the doors of international restrictions. If you want to invade the Tarnish to your heart's content, NordVPN stabilizes your connection, protecting it from DDoS attacks and bandwidth throttling from your service provider. As ISPs, government agencies, and marketers get more deeply ingrained into every facet of our online presence, a VPN is key now more than ever to stay protected. NordVPN has been kind enough to offer an additional month free on 2-year plans when using my link in the description, risk-free with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Big thanks to them for sponsoring today's video. Stay safe out there. Meanwhile, let's put ourselves back in danger with our next boss. Number 8, Starscourge Radahn. This may be the 8th best boss, but Radahn is hands down my favorite build-up in Elden Ring, perhaps ever in a FromSoft game. The Festival of Champions to combat a decaying demigod and put him out of his misery is executed brilliantly. It makes the subsequent fight feel like a triumph for both parties. The charge into battle with a horde of allies makes this raid boss amidst a desolate desert spectacular. Even if you choose to face him alone like I did, it's no less captivating. The one downside to this epic entrance is repeating that run-up can be tiresome. Ultimately, I think it's worth the trouble. At least unlike Elden Beast, you get full use of Torrent. Trading jousts with Radahn was surprisingly fun, but it was realizing through battle how fluid on foot to horseback swaps are that elevated the fight for me. Quickly summoning Torrent to outrange an attack, then swoop in for a counter is a rush unlike anything I've experienced before. Dismounting at key moments to take advantage of iframes is amazing when executed well. Radahn doesn't make it easy, however, with massive range, combos with volatile speed, and gravity magic to reposition you or blast you with meteors. I love how through it all you can manipulate his phasing. After taking a quarter of his HP, he's scripted to charge his blades with a slam. If you hug his ankles, you can dodge and counter during this. If you stay underneath him after, he'll follow with 2 hits you can tank for extra damage opportunities. With him flying away afterward, it's well worth the trade-off. That blast off into a careening cosmic slam has me in stitches every time. Its absurdity gets me in all the right ways. Not only is it easy to dodge, it offers you another counter opportunity with clever movement. The second phase builds well upon the first with more gravity magic to worry about. These days I often kill him before or right after the dive, but I enjoy it all nonetheless. I do find it strange that they nerfed Radahn though. I found him difficult, but never to an egregious point. Even in his reduced state, he's still a star. Number 7, Fire Giant. No torrent-enabled tussle shines brighter than this flaming behemoth. It's not lost on me that Fire Giant is more likely to show up on a lot of your worst bosses lists than the best, which if you're watching this video live, you can subscribe and go over to the community tab to vote right now. I understand where those of you who would rank him as a worst boss are coming from. He's the first main boss in the post-capital power creep, dealing astronomical damage compared to everything before him. If you don't level Vitality, you'll be devastated by every minor mistake. I can also see how reading his tells isn't the most intuitive. And I can't deny the second phase can be a slog with less apparent weak spots. Even if I recognize these drawbacks, I found ways to mitigate their impact and thoroughly enjoy all the incredible things this battle otherwise offers. The excessive damage is a game-wide issue from this point on, so it's hard to hold that directly against Fire Giant. Any attack he has that can combo you from full HP to 0 has distinct tells like his Flaming Vomit. You just have to keep a consistent eye on the mouth in phase 2. His overall attack cues are less obvious than most, but they are still readily available. Watching the posture of his feet, using sound cues for timing, or using Torrent to circumvent range are all excellent ways to guide your evasion. For example, when he raises his foot with a roar, wait for the change in his roar and the foot to twitch downward to know when to dodge. I love predicting where his feet will move based on each attack to keep the pressure on. As for the second phase, it becomes a lot more exciting when you read his attacks and position yourself to damage his wrists. It can be tricky to pull off, but each attack leaves viable ways to slash them at certain moments. This weak spot mechanic that focuses your offense against a large target to a dedicated area is a clever way to emphasize FromSoft's style of position-based offense with a drastic size difference. Like many big bosses, he will do attacks to put distance between you, but thankfully you've got full use of Torrent. The spectacle of riding horseback to close the gap and slash the giant's charred ankles is breathtaking, especially amidst the snow and the great visual design of the giant himself. This is capitalized upon in the Ludwig tier transition that is savage and eye-opening. I could hardly pick my jaw up off the floor when Phase 2 began. Once I did, I was busting a gut watching this behemoth barrel roll across the mountain. With excellent spectacle, underrated tells, great hitboxes for his size, multiple vulnerable points to focus on offense, a solid battle of attrition, and highlighting horseback in lieu of other oversized bosses disabling it, Fire Giant well earns my number 7 nod. Number 6, Hoarah Loux. The word brawl has never been so appropriate. Kicking things off with Godfrey's reappearance, it's a solid measure of how your skills have improved since your initial meeting with the Shade. I enjoy the addition of his axe kick into Earth Explosion. I especially enjoy how much you can jump over these sort of attacks in this fight. What makes Godfrey unique that becomes more apparent in Phase 2 is his aggression. His closing speed, constant stomping, and deceptive range force you to deal with him directly. Fortunately, his tells are great, the gaps he leaves are small but consistent, and he has enrages in both phases allowing you to punish him before he goes beast mode. During these steamy buffs, his stomps become arena-wide, layering pressure on even further. Getting into Phase 2, Hoarah Loux's unique brawler style throws you off the typical stare at a weapon for a tell, instead requiring you to study his entire body and all 4 limbs to defend effectively. While his offense can't feel oppressive, it's my belief this was intended to be a battle where you trade damage. A bloody brawl for the right to ascend the throne. The only attacks you need to evade are the many different grabs. They almost always begin with a long wind-up or sprint towards you, forcing proper dodges lest you be powerbombed for tremendous damage. The spectacle within this adrenaline-infused romp is an incredible appetizer for the finale. The wonderful OST elevates this all the more by hammering in the weight of each traded blow. I do knock him slightly for the first phase being a rehash of an earlier Shade, especially since Hoarah Loux doesn't last that long if you know what you're doing. Even so, everything I love about this battle was enough to land him outside a competitive top 5. Number 5, Dragonlord Placidusax. Of the many dragon encounters in Elden Ring, Placidusax is far and away my favorite. From the very start, it oozes his legend with the sick arena, great visual design with a nod to the 2 fingers, into a flashy, lightning-infused start. Placidusax's first advantage is his more balanced self-lightning. My least favorite feature by a mile of Lich Dragon Fortisax is how regularly he spawns lightning on the player throughout the battle, even as he's in the middle of doing other attacks. Placidusax remedies this by staying still during the 3 strikes, but making them much larger for more demanding evasion. It still allows you to get offense in, you just have to respect the dodge timing and moderate your stamina. The entire battle operates in similar fashion, with clever ways to take advantage with proper study of his moveset. You can opt to run back toward the front on the 3rd lightning strikes in the hopes of baiting his rear fire breath from the unsinged side. Even if he does this when you're behind him, you can run and poke the end of the tail safely. Similarly, his explosive lightning is also safe with the tail. His slash and spinning breath can be safely dodged by hugging the tail, then countering when the spin stops. His wing slam has large gaps in between and excellent hitboxes to allow dodging. Even his ultimate attack can be effectively dodged at range or taken advantage of for the ballsy if you can get in quickly. His lift into Phase 2 changes the weather and battle in exciting ways. The spectacle of his clouded form into diving slash is incredible and fun to dodge. His later variant has a lingering hitbox that can be dealt with by sprinting away from the blast then dodging. Done effectively, he won't teleport immediately after like the first, and you can punish the tail. You may notice I mention the tail a lot. It's an important feature. With a lot of the big bosses running too far away, it's nice that most of Placidusax's attacks leave him within reasonable range. The teleports are exactly that, forced dodges that move you toward him once they conclude. The only downside is when he excessively spams those teleporting attacks, or flyaways, arbitrarily increasing the difficulty against fights where he chooses not to. The battle of attrition here is notable due to his high HP. Nonetheless, there are many ways to take advantage of his kit for the well-studied that make this eye candy bout just as satisfying to execute. Number 4, Maliketh the Black Blade. The epitome of a glass cannon, Maliketh flirts the line of excessive damage balanced by brittle HP. This increases the significance of every clash dramatically, making the end result swift death in either direction. While much can be said about Maliketh's quality, let's not ignore the excellent interlude. The Beast Clergyman mixes swift combos with beast incantations to be a force of nature at every range. Like Maliketh, he has rough attacks that must be respected, while others have direct openings like the 180 cleave leaving his rear open, or a Beast Claw swipe that is easily jumped over. Variations on that Beast Claw and Pocket Sand require evasions to be executed at slightly different times, requiring tight reaction speed. He doesn't outstay his welcome, quickly shirking his garb for an Artorias-esque feral design matching with equally compelling music and voice acting. Like the first phase, Maliketh uses subtle variations on similar tells to obscure his intentions. His soaring slashes have odd delays, irregular quantity, and are inconsistently followed up upon. Sometimes you get reprieve, others you are dealing with a sudden slam or a double 360 slash. His finishers typically revolve around the Judgment Cut weapon art, double 360 slash, explosive slam, or earth-shattering pulse. All of these make it dangerous to stay close, which is hard to avoid due to his leaping gap closers. His agility, however, is well balanced by the large opportunities he'll leave before delivering these blows, and if you know how, you can bait these attacks and evade them entirely, leaving a big opening. Where Maliketh gets you is his ability to combo these more suddenly than you might expect. He deviates from his script quite readily, making it a reaction-based encounter, which is quite difficult at the speed it demands. The one big drawback in this regard is how Maliketh can feel deflating when you get destroyed in an instant, then lasting an underwhelming amount of time before victory when you get easy attacks. The quality of the second phase can be astounding, but I found those moments of bliss inconsistent. At his best, Maliketh has an argument for top 3 billing. Taking into consideration times where it hits notes slightly off key, he takes the number 4 spot. Number 3, Malenia, Blade of Miquella, and Goddess of Rot. That's right, I'm a Malenia masochist. Despite how many name drops and rot-consuming defeats I've endured, I still adore this fight. What Radahn needs a whole festival for, Malenia sums up in a few short words.
And I have never known defeat.
Gaming adversaries are known for talking smack, it's being able to back it that adds weight to each word. Malenia is arguably the hardest boss FromSoft has ever created. She has a demanding moveset with contextual combo variations, frame traps, excellent range and attack speed, and filthy damage that heals her in return. A brutal twist on a battle of attrition, this fight issues dual punishment for mistakes. Rather than merely risking death and depleting healing resources, they now elongate the battle. What counteracts all of these advantages is your ability to stunlock her. Not only that, her first phase takes a generally passive stance, allowing you to run away and regroup. With a good weapon art and timing, you can use superior range to turn the tide in your favor. This makes for an immensely satisfying to master encounter. Into a second phase where her timings are further altered, new additions to combos are added, and you need to be wary for finishers and ultimate moves that inflict Scarlet Rot. The Scarlet Blossom is a blessing in disguise for its reprieve and opportunity for ranged damage. You can even rush in and get a handful of melee blows on her safely before the animation finishes. The 7-strike summons are less forgiving, though running far back left means you only need to dodge the 6th and 7th hits, a final strike that leaves her open. This is where things get iffy. She can decide to cancel her recovery frames to sometimes start a new assault after all of this. It makes you question when you're really safe to attack and can be tiresome when you have to wait 20 to 30 seconds for an opening. I wouldn't really mind with consideration to the chess match of stunlocking her. The second phase ups the ante by having her leap out of reach, whereas in phase 1, it's safe to stunlock her with the exception of a few attacks with hyper armor. As long as she starts these attacks before yours, it's fair to be countered by them. So a leap out of the way or a jumping slash I wasn't prepared for? Fair game. What's less balanced is her kick. In phase 2, Malenia will regularly boot herself out of stunlock. That thing that makes her demanding moveset and lifesteal balanced, she can throw it out the window at will. Again, I wouldn't mind if her kick landed before your attack, but she can break already ongoing stunlock at will. Even worse, watch this clip where I intentionally planned my spacing, waited for her to commit an attack animation, knew mine was faster at this range, and got punished after all that planning with a swift roundhouse. Of course, this all pales in comparison to her hitting the win button. I cannot believe Radahn got nerfed in a game where Waterfowl Dance exists untouched. Yes, after months of getting stomped, players have adapted to using freeze pots for proc interruptions, Bloodhound Step for swift evasion, or simply getting good and rolling at the perfect times. Overall, I don't dislike Waterfowl as a concept. An oh shit moment for the player against a beautiful display of swordswomanship, asking high execution to evade unscathed is the quintessential roll check experience FromSoft is specialized in. It's simply overtuned. The windup isn't long enough for the distance the first flurry covers. If you get it at point blank range, you have to be nearly flawless to successfully dodge. Failure subjects you to astronomical damage that breathes life into her HP bar if you even survive. A single flurry can melt even the thickest of HP bars. It's tricky because I could say downscale the damage and increase the windup, but at what point does that go the other way of it being overly easy to deal with and therefore pointless? Personally, I favor the idea of a lightning reversal or Mikiri type counter from Sekiro. If I catch it very quickly, let me do a jump attack in the air to knock her down. Let it devastate me if I misread it or mistime it within a reasonable margin of error, but don't simply let it be something that can end an attempt instantly for a minor mistimed roll. Despite Waterfowl being overtuned and her ridiculous animation cancels knocking her a tiny bit, my Stockholm Syndrome is full blown. Every victory against her is as satisfying as the last. Each loss teaches me something new about her design. There's remarkable room for expression in this fight based on your knowledge. Like many of the series' best, it's a combat playground that demands you give it your all. Perhaps more than you ever knew you had. Number 2, Rykard, Lord of Blasphemy. If there's a singular strength Elden Ring bosses hold over the rest of FromSoft's work, it's their spectacle. The visual design, combat effects, soundtrack, and grandeur create atmosphere consistently among the best they've ever accomplished. Rykard is the finest example. Fighting a monstrous serpent amongst a chasm of corpses is chilling. Unlike many large bosses, the framing of combat always keeps you locked in with its whole body. Every chomp, slam, and spit carries colossal force. You're able to return in kind with breathtaking blows from the special spear provided. The second phase might be the most berserk the series has ever felt, facing off against a massive beast, only to find it devoured a demigod who's now in control, pulling a corpse-laden blade from its jaws as he spews mad philosophy in an otherworldly tone. As you clash, souls of his victims are released from the blade, slowly building a hellscape of agony above. The arena gradually darkens with a reddish hue until he commands the fallen to shower you with their fury. As the music reaches a dramatic peak, oblivion descends in the form of dozens of flaming skulls, ending in a charged slam. This rise in tension is perfectly paced to the moment where it all explodes. It's nothing short of a visual masterpiece. Where these sorts of battles have previously faltered is not delivering satisfying gameplay. Rykard shirks this trend, and is a shining example of some of the best combat design in Elden Ring. As previously mentioned, the battle is framed well for a large enemy. This is thanks to the unique weapon you fight with. This special weapon trope goes back to Demon Souls against Storm King, and was paid homage to in Dark Souls 3 with Yorm the Giant. Rather than forcing the player to commit a single heavy animation, this spear has a full suite of attacks. It's remarkable how intuitive it handles, with typical light R1 attacks, heavier R2s, jump attacks, and the sick weapon art that can stagger at key moments. It requires no stats, so everyone is on the same playing field. That's part of what makes it so special. Without needing to balance for every build choice, FromSoft was able to curate the most balanced experience in the game. It harkens back to Sekiro, where expression came through your execution of streamlined combat rather than approaching it with dozens of different tools. While I understand that funneled style isn't superior for everyone, I'm a massive fan, especially when it's executed well. The only real drawbacks here are an abusable weapon art that can stagger lock him if you have the FP and spam the first half only, and the magic fire pathing isn't predictable enough. With eye square on the boss, its visual tell is all you can rely on. There are times where it goes underneath you and can only be seen once it's too late, or certain attacks that are best handled by moving backward, only to fall victim to explosions you didn't know were behind you. I'm sure some of you were annoyed by the Skull Rain, and I kinda was in my first playthrough too, but the value of the spectacle and ease of running away as long as you commit far outweighs any negatives for me. Rykard is excellently balanced, has out of this world visual design, the soundtrack is hands down my favorite in the game, and the special combat style leaves a unique impression I won't soon forget. He'd be my number one choice if it weren't for another dastardly devil. And the number one best boss in Elden Ring, Mogh Lord of Blood. Some might say his intro is cheese. Personally, I love how Mogh hams it up. Unfortunately, his dad tier charisma loses its luster when you realize he ain't the father of that egg, and he's up to things far too nefarious for me to mention. Really though, it's nice to be able to put away the moral grayness and shove the full force of your hatred up Mogh's anus. Being the Lord of Blood whose fiery passion for his dynasty burns the very fluid he flings is metal as hell. The animation of him reaching into another dimension can be followed in so many ways. A frontal toss, a frontal shot forward, a shower spawned on top of him, not to mention the frontal claw with delayed explosion, the 180 side slash into horizontal bash, the jumping toss followed by a flying swing, an uppercut slash, horizontal slashes, explosive ground bashes, and a few thrust variations. It's a great choice that all of the variants involving blood flame flinging off the weapon don't come until phase 2. This gives you ample time to learn how to deal with his more standard blood flame attacks and his melee moves. His large trident is wielded in a more moderate, deliberately paced manner compared to the many fast bosses in Elden Ring. To balance out these wider gaps, the trident has extreme range, made all the larger in phase 2 with the blood flame slings and gap closing attacks. He also relies heavily on delayed tells, though they feel easier to identify thanks to his large weapon and flashy effects that don't completely obscure his intentions. Many of his attacks can even be strafed entirely, most notably his main Phase 1 mechanic, the Latin Hemorrhage. Mogh's been entertaining his youthful guest too long and emulates Sesame Street's Count, offering a trace, duo, uno, and ultimately nihil when doom has arrived. He applies each number at certain HP thresholds. These are key openings to take advantage of. He thrusts the spear upward, then swings it down to his left hip, leaving the right hip wide open for lengthy punishment. Ironically, the Lord of Blood is weak to bleed, making this a perfect opportunity to layer on the status. He is also quite susceptible to staggers, offering the player ample chance to put the hurt on him before Phase 2. It's a vital strategy since the countdown leads to another iteration of lifesteal, my personal favorite over Maliketh and Malenia. It's consistent every time in waves of 3, with the third hit being heavier. This allows you to pre-strategize around the lost resource instead of scrambling in the moment as further punishment for being hit. It's also neat that exploration, Elden Ring's biggest strength as a game, is rewarded by giving you a shackle to stun him and a physic tier to negate Nihil's damage. In Phase 2, the reach of the Trident, Blood Flame attacks, and leaping strikes add a lot of pressure. The large arena feels claustrophobic when you're squared up with Mogh and avoiding a sea of blood flames scattered everywhere. While it is a bit overkill, that's the only real downside I have. Every attack he uses has a viable counter, the music is phenomenally Bloodborne-esque, his unique attack style is refreshing compared to overly speedy bosses, the build up to him is well done, his pool of attacks is vast with subtle delays giving variations in his tells, the lifesteal is balanced well and makes for a supremely unique and twisted phase change, and he's one of the very few bosses in the game that never feels unbalanced. For all that and more, the Lord of Blood is my choice for Elden Ring's greatest boss. But of course, that's just my opinion. If you want to share yours, subscribe and check the community tab where you can vote on upcoming community-based rankings. I can't wait to hear from you all. Until then, thanks for watching, much love to you, and I'll see you in the next video.